to lift. Say to lift up or to receive or to carry your words. Go to Proverbs 4. In verses 4 and 5. Proverbs chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. Verse 4 said, He also taught me and said to me, Let your heart retain my words, keep my commands and live, or have life. Keep my commands and live, or have life. Keeping the commandments of Yahweh gives you life. Verse 5, he said, Get wisdom, get understanding, do not forget nor turn away from the words of my mouth. Do you think that he's adamant concerning his word and how we're supposed to live in regard to his word? What's supposed to have more importance in our life, his word or what somebody else thinks or says? His word or what the world says? Does this have any bearing? Who's speaking? Up in verse 1, Hear, my children, the instruction of a father, and give attention to no understanding. These are Proverbs, mostly of Solomon, most of them. Who did he learn from? David, his father. Verse 2, he says, For I give you good doctrine, do not forsake my law. If you just kind of paraphrase that, it's saying, do not forsake the law of the Father. But when we distort what it says over in the New Testament, when Messiah, we only have to keep what he said, not what the Father says. Isn't that distorting what everything's teaching? They're not following the words of the Father. Shamar means to what? To hedge about with thorns, to keep, to hold, to guard. We must be guardians of the Word. How many people out there are really trying to teach other people, but they're not guardians of what the Word says, and they got so much doctrines mixed in with what they're teaching? When you're teaching somebody, you have to be very, very careful that you're only giving them what the Word says, right? That makes you a guardian then of the Word. If we say one thing and do something different, what does that make it? Not like a hypocrite or a liar, right? Go to Proverbs chapter 20. Excuse me. Well, in the same chapter, go to verse 20. 20, 21, and 22. My son, give attention to my words, incline your ear to my sayings. Do not let them depart from your eyes. Keep them in the midst of your heart, for their life to those who find them, and health to all their flesh. Does that say their life to those who find them? The Hebrew that says their life to those who find them, the implication is that they're hidden and you have to go search them out. But when you find them, then you will have life from those if you do what they say. If life is hidden in his word and somebody else is telling you you don't have to follow that old word, what are they robbing you of? Life. I'm saying we must understand and we must walk in his words in order to receive the blessings given in his word. And we must understand that before we can share it with someone else. If you go back and look at that passage again, I'm talking about Deuteronomy, he cares for all his people, right? These 5 verses, his divine law was given to Israel. But at the same time, they were to be a light to all nations. We all remember that passage, right? Go back to Deuteronomy 4. In verses 5 through 8. Verse 5, he says, surely I have taught you statutes and judgments, just as Yahweh Elohim commanded me that you should do them in the land which you go to possess. Therefore keep, 8104, Shamar, and do, 6213. For this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of these people, who will hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. Verse 6, keep and do, guard, treasure, store, hedge about, protect, keep, guard, and do. You have to guard them. When other people are trying to throw out his word or mix it with something else, or don't have to do those kind of things, somebody's got to be guarding the validity of his word as it was originally written. How many people are actually guarding what that word truly says? Oh, well, we can switch over, we can do this, or well, the prophet said so and so, or we can change to this. It really doesn't matter. He doesn't care. This word says keep, guard that word, and do what it says do. Right? If you're not guarding the word, then you're allowing the word to become distorted. And if this word is Messiah Yehoshua, then you're allowing Messiah Yehoshua to become distorted as to who he is to you. It's a hard concept to get a hold of, isn't it? But how many people are really guarding what this word originally says in the way it's originally written? How many people are guarding that? But what does this word say do? I'm just trying to get us to understand how many were saved at the flood. Noah and his family. 8 people out of all the billions that died. Is that a very small percentage? But yet how many did Yahweh find righteous at that time? Sodom and Gomorrah, how many did he go down? He took Lot out, right? He said, if I find 10 people, I'll not destroy it for the sake of 10. He didn't even find 10 people. And he took his family out and destroyed the whole thing. When he comes back, will he find faith on the earth? We read that question in the book of Hebrews, right? Will he find faith on the earth? Will he find trust? Will he find people keeping, guarding, and doing the word? You reckon that's what he means? When he said, when I come back, will I find faith on the earth? Will I find people guarding and holding on and doing my word? But he says, many are going to say to me in that day, we did this and that, we healed this. But I'm going to say, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice transgression of the law. If you're transgressing the law, that means you're not keeping, guarding the word, or doing it. If you were guarding it, you'd be doing it. If you're not doing it, it's because you're not guarding it either, right? And if you're not doing it, you're not even allowing somebody else to do or guard, or showing them how. And if we're supposed to be teaching, we show people how to do something, right? I know everybody wants to be worthy. I want to be worthy. Verse 7 says, for what great nation is there that has Elohim so near to it as Yahweh Eloheinu is to us for whatever we may call upon him? And what great nation is there that has such statutes and righteous judgments as are in all this Torah which I set before you this day? What nation is there that has such a righteous law as what Yahweh gave to the children of Israel? There is none. What other nation did he ever give this Torah to as a covenant? There is none. How many people today would like to, for you to believe that, oh, well, we've replaced the nation of Israel as his chosen people? The church has replaced Israel as a chosen people. We've all heard that before, right? Who can replace somebody that's totally righteous in his eyes? If he destroys those that are unrighteous, do you think he's going to go out there and just bring in another group and say, oh, well, you don't have to do any of that kind of stuff that I killed him for, but I love you anyway, and I'll give you an ice cream cone, whatever you want to do, and you don't have to do nothing I said. But that's what people would like for us to believe, that he destroyed those wicked ones because they wouldn't keep his law, and then replaced them with another nation of people who he didn't expect to keep their law. Does that make a whole lot of sense? Okay. Go back to Deuteronomy 33. The verse in verse 4. Moses commanded a law. Now that word law is 8451. It is the Hebrew word Torah. Moses commanded or commissioned to us a law. Remember, the word Torah, 8451, is not a root word. It comes from 3384. And the root word 3384 is the Hebrew word Yah. Like Y-A-W-R-A-H, Yah-Ra. Yah-Ra. And this Hebrew word Yah-Ra means to flow as water. It means to shoot an arrow. It means to point out, as in shoot out the finger, point out. It also means to teach. Moshe was called the lawgiver, and he was supposed to teach the children of Israel the ways of Yahweh. You don't learn the ways of Yahweh and ignore the teachings of Moshe. Okay? You must teach what Moshe taught if you want somebody else to learn the ways that you're trying to teach. In Matthew 23, Messiah was talking about the people. He said, they sit in Moses' seat now. He said, they're the ones that are sitting there as the teachers. He said, do what they say because they're teaching Torah, but don't do what they do because they weren't living what Torah was saying. If we're going to be true disciples of Yehoshua, then we must teach what the Word says and do it at the same time. Is that important? I think it is. He commanded a commission of Torah for us, a heritage of the congregation of Yaakov. That word heritage is the number 4181. Actually, it's the Hebrew word morashah. Literally, instead of a heritage, the word itself means a possession. A possession. A heritage or an inheritance is something we think of we get after somebody else dies, right? But this is your possession. And what was this? This fiery law. A Torah, a law, a possession of the congregation of Yaakov. Is that specifically referring to a group of people who came from the loins of Yaakov, whose name was changed to Israel, that it belongs to all of who? All the descendants of Israel, and those who joined with them. Before we go to verse 5 again, we'll talk about just a little bit. Go to Romans 9. We're reading here in Deuteronomy where he says that this law is a possession of the sons of Yaakov, right? Here in Romans 9, verses 3, 4, and 5, Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul, writes, for I could wish that I myself were accursed from the Mashiach, for my brethren, my kinsmen according to the flesh, who are Israelites, to whom pertain or belong the adoption, the glory, the covenants, the giving of the Torah, the service of El, and the promises, of whom are the fathers, and from whom, according to the flesh, the Mashiach came, who is over all the eternally blessed Yahweh. Amen. Is that not what he's saying? Who does this Torah belong to according to him? Israelites. So many people out there would like to think, oh, well, there's two families that Yahweh has. One is the Jews and the other is the Gentiles. So many people like to think that. And then they try to say, well, the Gentiles, the one we're referring to, is the one we call the church. Well, the church is his and the Jews are his. And both of them are being blessed. How many times does the scripture say, if you're a sinner, you ain't got nothing? How many times does the Scripture say if Yahweh gives you something good, it's to bring you back to Him and to bring you to walk back in obedience? Not because, but to bring you to Him.
Gentiles without Yahweh, they are Gentiles without Him.
Well, I understand being without Him. But I'm trying to, what we have to understand is there's so many people that are trying to teach you got separate groups of people. And in Yahweh's eyes, you got one group. You got the righteous and the wicked. I understand. Forget what we call them. I don't care where you're from or what tribe you're from or anything else, right? If you're not walking in obedience to the Torah, He's going to say, I never knew you. Period. Nothing else really has any bearing. Go to Ephesians chapter 2. Verse 11 and 12. What's that passage you were talking about? Verse 11 of Ephesians chapter 2, it says, Therefore remember that you, once Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, made in the flesh by hand, that at that time you were without the Mashiach, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope, and without El or Yahweh in the world. If you want them Gentiles, you ain't got nothing. They were what? They didn't have the commonwealth of Israel. Isn't it funny that Great Britain calls himself a commonwealth, and yet all of it based on what? Church of England, which King Henry started because he didn't like what the Catholic Church said when he wanted to divorce his wife. So how come the Church of England got started? Because a man warned it. And who's the head of the Church of England? King of England. Does that tell you who's running it? And it was only because he was trying to get away from that other religion called Catholic, and it was being run by what a man called who? The Pope or Father. Go to Galatians 3. Y'all have heard me talk about this a lot here lately, and we'll probably talk about it some more. Galatians 3, verse 29. And if you are the Mashiach, that is, if you belong to Him, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. Heir of what? This possession that belongs to you. And this possession that belongs to you is what? This fiery law, this Torah that He brought up, that Moses received and wrote down. If you belong to the Messiah, then your possession is this Torah. How many people treat this Torah like it's some type of a fiery possession that's theirs, and they really want to keep it? How many people do that?
A remnant.
Only a remnant. In verse 5, back in Deuteronomy 33, and he was king in Yeshurun. Isn't that what most Bibles say? Yeshurun, Jeshurun. Number for that word is 348 for you. Yeshurun. I think if you look up this word and go through all the things, it kind of goes back to the word of Yashur, or Jasher, Yeshurun, which means the upright. And this is a symbolic name for the nation of Israel. He was what? King in Yeshurun. He was king in those who are upright. How many times does the book of Judges make the statement, there was no king in Israel, therefore each man did what was right in his own eyes? If you are Israel and you have no king, then you do what's right in your own eyes. But if Yehoshua, Yahweh, is your king, then you do what He said. Then that makes Him king over Yeshurun, the upright, who are walking in obedience to the Torah. How can you wind up being one of the upright and having your name written in the book of Yashur or the book of the upright and not do what Yahweh's word says in Torah? If you throw out your inheritance, what do you got left? If we look at the prodigal son, in the New Testament. He went and squandered everything that Yahweh gave him on prodigal or wasteful living, and then he came home, and the Father went out to meet. So who's coming home? The house of Israel, right? We're coming back. The prodigal is coming back. He was king in Yeshurun when the leaders of the people were gathered, all the tribes of Israel together. One thing I noticed, that word tribe there is a number 7626. 7626. The word tribes. The word is Shebet, like S-H-E-B-E-T, Shebet in the Hebrew. And it does mean tribes. But it also means sticks, plural. All the sticks. He was king in Yeshurun when the leaders of the people were gathered, and all the sticks of Israel brought together. How about the reuniting of the sticks in Ezekiel 37? Isn't that neat? And he was king over the upright, all the tribes, the sticks. Yeah, but this is not stick singular, this is sticks as in plural. Shebet. All the sticks together. I thought that's kind of a neat thought. Now in verse 6 he starts talking about all the different tribes of the different sticks. Well, if we can all think about those tribes as being sticks, you know, and then we look up again and talk about Ephraim, you know, and all his companions, those other sticks. Judah and his companions and all them other sticks. And then he's going to reunite all the sticks together. Isn't that a neat, beautiful picture? I mean, you know, all them sticks are branches off the same tree, right? Verse 6. Let Reuben live and not die. Most English Bibles then says, nor let his men be few. Which makes it sound like, you know, let Reuben live and not die. And his men are not going to be few. They're going to be a whole bunch, right? But the word nor is not in there. Actually, the word said, let his men be few. Go back to Genesis 49. It's hard to read the blessings of Moshe without going back and looking at what Yaakov said. In Genesis 49, in verse 3 and 4, Jacob says, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. That's the right of the firstborn, is it not? But then he said, but unstable as water, you shall not excel or grow or prosper or magnify. Because you went up to your father's bed, you defiled it, he went up to my couch. He will not prosper, he will not excel. And then that's the same thing here. Let Reuben live and not die. Let his men be few. Reuben's going to live, and there's going to be a tribe, but there ain't going to be many of them. And the right of the firstborn passed from Reuben to Joseph. Verse 7, in this he said of Judah. Really not very much here in Deuteronomy about, you know, Judah in verse 7. Hear, Yahweh, the voice of Judah, and bring him to his people. Let his hands be sufficient for him, and may you be a help against his enemies. Doesn't sound like very much, does it? But let's go back to Genesis in 49. We're going to be going back and forth to Genesis 49. Just keep your fingers over there. Starting in verse 8. The Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who shall rouse him? I mean, think about it. You walking out in the tundra, you know, and you see a group of lions asleep. And there's a big old lion over there asleep under a tree, you know, just, you'll walk over and slap him inside the head and say, wake up. I mean, and then in verse 10 he says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah. The scepter is the key of ruling, as in the kingdom. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes. The word Shiloh in the Hebrew is not a name there, even though most people have a capital S on it. The Hebrew word Shiloh means him to whom it belongs. So if you translate it, it says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until he to whom it belongs comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. Binding his donkey to the vine and his donkey's coat to the choice vine. Who was it? The Lion of the tribe of Judah, who came as a lamb and rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. I mean, see how all these little things, you know, fit. They match up. Going back into Deuteronomy now. In verse 8, and of Levi he said, yet let your Tumim and your Urim be with your Holy One, whom you tested at Massah, and with whom you contended at the waters of Meribah. Your Tumim and your Urim with your Holy One? What is the Tumim and the Urim? Urim is lights, Tumim is perfections. The lights and perfections are with your Holy One. Who did they test at Massah? They tested Yahweh, the one who was leading him. And with whom you contended at the waters of Meribah. All the things, you know, all these times they tested him, and they contended, you know. But of Levi, he said, the number for Tumim is 8550. And the word Urim is 224. If we go on and read verse 9, it's still talking about Levi, who says of his father and mother, I have not seen them, nor did he acknowledge his brothers or know his own children. For they have observed your word and kept your covenant. They shall teach Yaakov your judgments and Israel your law. This is what Moses is saying. They will teach. They shall put incense before you and a whole burnt sacrifice on your altar. Bless his substance, Yahweh, and accept the work of his hands. Strike the loins of those who rise against him, and of those who hate him, that they rise not again. If Yahweh strikes somebody down so that they can't rise up, that's pretty hard, isn't it? Evidently, then he has some, consideration for the tribe of Levi. Go to Exodus chapter 1. Exodus 32, excuse me. Verses 26 through 28. Remember what we just read over here. He's talking about Levi. and he's talking about, who says of his father and mother, I have not seen them, nor did he acknowledge his brothers, or know his own children. For they have observed your word and kept your covenant. Here in Exodus 32. In verse 26, this is where Moshe had come down, and all the people were made this golden calf, and were doing all this kind of stuff, and Aaron had thrown all this gold stuff in the pot, and he said, I just threw it in, and out come this calf, Verse 26, then Moshe stood in the entrance of the camp and said, whoever is on Yahweh's side, to me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together to him, and he said to them, Thus says Yahweh Elohim of Israel, let every man put his sword in his side and go in and out from the entrance to entrance throughout the camp, and let every man kill his brother, every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. So the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moshe, and about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. Levi went out killing with the sword. Didn't matter who they were. He killed those who did not keep the covenant of Yahweh. Is that not what it says? And here Moses is talking about him, who said of his father and mother, I have not seen them, nor did he acknowledge his brothers or know his own children. He killed those who would not walk in the ways of Yahweh. Isn't that what they did? Is that because Yahweh is mean? He sacrificed his own people to remove the evil out of the camp. Yahweh's word is so important to him, he will destroy those who use that word wrongfully, to try to distort it to somebody else. Go to Numbers 25. Verses 10 through 15. Then Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, has turned back my wrath from the children of Israel, the sons of Israel, because he was zealous with my zeal among them, so that I did not consume the sons of Israel in my zeal. Phinehas, one of the sons of Levi, was zealous in his attitude toward Yahweh's word, and when this other guy brought the woman in, what did he do? He went and killed him. He didn't wait for somebody to go tell him what to do. He just went and did it. Verse 12 says, Therefore say, Behold, I give to him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and his descendants after him a covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for Eloah and made atonement for the sons of Israel. Now the name of the Israelite who was killed with the Midianite woman, was Zimri, the son of Salu, a leader of father's house among the Simeonites. This Midianite, isn't it strange that Midianite here, this Midianite woman was from the same land that Moshe and the fiery law of Yahweh came up from. And then here they were trying to bring this Midianite woman, bring Midian into the middle of it, and all that kind of thing. Yahweh is not going to allow his word to be mixed with anything that's wrong or distorted. Verse 15, the name of the Midianite woman who was killed was Cosbi, the daughter of Zur. He was the head of the people of a father's house in Midian. And his name was what? The daughter of Zur, which means rock. The daughter of the rock. Isn't it funny? The scriptures tell us that Hasatan makes himself out to be what? An angel of light. And then it asks the question, is it any wonders then that his ministers come as ministers of righteousness? Organized religion teaching against the word of Yahweh. And if the word of Yahweh is the light of Yahweh, the light of Yahweh, the word Yehoshua, anything then that deviates from that deviates and changes who he is. Paul said, anybody who preaches anything to you other than what you've heard before according to the Torah, let them be called what? Anathema, bitterly cursed. Okay. I'll go to Malachi. Malachi 2, excuse me. I know everybody has read and looked and thought about these, and so forth, but it's kind of like I said, we were talking about it, and used to everybody was considered, we were supposed to all be considered a nation or a kingdom of priests, right? Before we ever knew anything, everybody's supposed to be a kingdom of priests. Verse 1 of Malachi 2 says, And now, O priest, this commandment is for you. If you will not hear it, if you will not take it to heart to give glory to my name, says Yahweh Sabaoth, I will send a curse upon you, and I will curse your blessing. Yes, I have cursed him already, because you do not take it to heart. Behold, I will rebuke your descendants and spread dung on your faces, the dung of your solemn feast, and will take you away with it. Then you shall know that I have sent this commandment to you, that my covenant with Levi may continue, says Yahweh Sabaoth. My covenant was with him of life and peace, and I gave them to him that he might fear me. So he feared me and was reverent before my name. The Torah of truth was in his mouth, and injustice was not found on his lips. He walked with me in peace and equity, and turned many away from iniquity. For the lips of a priest should keep knowledge. And the implication is then that people should seek the Torah from his mouth, for he is the messenger of Yahweh Sabaoth. If somebody comes to you and asks you something concerning, or your life, or the ministry, or the word, or anything else, what should you give them? What Torah says. You don't tell them what you think. You don't tell them what you feel. Doesn't matter. You give them what Torah says. The words of Torah imputes life. Nothing else can. When people try to give something that they think, or that they feel, or I believe, or I this, or I that, or whatever, then they're trying to what? They're trying to be the life giver in place of the Torah. Yahweh, the word, the true life giver. If we look at our English word, Moses was the lawgiver. In the law, word Torah, instruction for having life. So then you can say that Moses was really the life giver, not just a lawgiver. The instructions for having life is what he gave. Okay, go back to Deuteronomy. Verse 12. Of Benjamin he said, the beloved of Yahweh shall dwell in safety by him, who shelters him all the day long, and he shall dwell between his shoulders. If I'm not mistaken, and I could be, but I think I'm not here, the property line, or the border between Benjamin and Judah in the south runs kind of like right through the Temple Mount. And like the temple's in one thing and the courtyard is in the other. And it's kind of like Benjamin then, who's living in that area, it dwells on his shoulders. It's kind of like, it becomes a bridge between the two. He shall dwell between his shoulders, right? Go to Ezekiel 48. How many people understand that Ezekiel chapter 48, when they're talking about the divisions of the land of Israel, is still in the future? This one hasn't happened yet, okay? Verse 22. Moreover, apart from the possession of the Levites, and the possession of the city which are in the midst of what belonged to the prince, the area between the border of Judah and the border of Benjamin shall belong to the prince. As for the rest of the tribe from the east side to the west, Benjamin shall have one portion. You can go on down, you can look at it, everything that stretches across, from one side to the other. All the land is going to be broken up into sections, kind of like, like if you drew lines on a piece of paper. They put names in one of them. This land area belonged to one tribe, this land area to that tribe, this land. Before it was all broken up, and we have trouble trying to go back. But here everything is a straight line across. This section belongs to this tribe, this section, that one, this section, that one, and come right down the road. But part of there between Judah and Benjamin is going to belong to the prince. Right between. Remember, Benjamin means what? Ben, son of my right arm, Ben Yamin. And if I'm temples in Benjamin, but then the outer courts are in Judah. The way that the line goes across. Going back to verse 13, and of Joseph he said, boy, this is a fantastic blessing that he puts on Joseph. When we first begin to learn about the two houses, Israel and Judah, Ephraim and Judah, at that time all we knew was the between Joseph and Judah. And the house of Joseph was what we begin to study and begin to learn. But here in verse 13, and of Joseph he said. Now remember the tribe, or the Joseph, the stick which is in the hand of who? Ephraim. Joseph is the one who received the birthright because of the failure of Reuben, and it passed from Reuben to Joseph, who was the firstborn son of the other wife. Okay? And then through Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, between those two, then he received a double portion. Blessed of Yahweh is his land, with the precious things of heaven, with the dew and the deep lying beneath, with the precious fruits of the sun, with the precious produce of the months, with the best things of the ancient mountains, with the precious things of the everlasting hills, with the precious things of the earth and its fullness, and the favor of him who dwelt in the bush. Goes right back to Exodus, doesn't it? Moses in the bush. The favor of him who dwelt in the bush. Let come on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him, separate from his brothers. His glory like a firstborn bull, his horns like the horns of the wild ox. Together with them he shall push the peoples to the ends of the earth. They are the 10,000s of Ephraim, they are the thousands of Manasseh. Yahweh's going to come with his what? Thousands upon thousands and 10,000s. Ephraim and Manasseh. The house of Israel coming home. If Judah hasn't turned to the Messiah by that time, then when they see him whom they have pierced, they will become believers. So there's a lot of things that you can look at, say that the total reuniting of the house of Judah and the house of Israel is going to be in that last day when he comes back. We'd like for it to be ahead of time, you know, and he might bring some of us back into Israel ahead of time, but I think it's closer to that time, that end time, when everything gets totally reunited. The name Joseph is the number 3130. Yosef would be the way you actually, Yosef. The name means Yahweh has added, future tense, not past tense. As future tense. Yahweh has added as future tense of 3254, which is the word Yosef, which means to add or to contrive to add. When Rachel gave birth, she called him Yosef, meaning Yahweh will add to me. This term Joseph now becomes the 3130, which means Yahweh has added in the future tense for the completion of it. I know a lot of these things really don't mean anything. They don't, you know, to most people, when you don't go looking up words and stuff, they don't have any meaning. But if when she gave birth to this child, she calls him Yosef, meaning, you know, Yahweh is going to contrive to add to me. But then we see the other one, and it's referring to the future tense, he's going to add. Is that not a prophecy in itself, just to the names? And I may have the number mixed up there on what I'm looking at, but 3130 and 3254 are these two different tenses of this name Yosef. But now in Ephraim and Manasseh, they're the 10,000s of Ephraim. 10,000 of Ephraim. Ephraim means double portion or double fruit.
3250?
Huh?
Did you say 3250? You put that? 54.
3254. But Ephraim is double fruit, and of course Manasseh means causing to forget. So there's a whole lot more there of Ephraim than there were of Manasseh.
These were the ones that were scattered.
Yeah. All over the place. And go back to Genesis 48. In verse 19, this is where Joseph was trying to get, his father to unswitch the hands and bless Ephraim and Manasseh the way he thought it ought to be. Verse 19, but his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know, yada, yada, as to ascertain from above. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great, referring to Manasseh. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become the Melo Goyim, the fullness of the Gentiles, is what it said. Remember in Romans it talks about, until, the fullness of the Gentiles be come in, and so all Israel shall be saved. Okay? Then back in Genesis 27, in verses 27 through 29. This is Jacob going before his father Yitzhak. In verse 27 it says, and he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing, and blessed him, and said. Remember, this is Yitzhak blessing Yaakov, correct? Yaakov, who then gave birth to the others. Verse 20, therefore may Elohim give you of the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Who is he speaking to here? Then he said, cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be those who bless you. Yaakov, right? But it was Joseph who had the dream about the mother and the father and all the brothers bowing down to him in the sheaves, remember? When Yaakov says, shall your mother and all your brothers bow down to you, he understood exactly what the dream meant. And then we saw, when Joseph was shipped off, right? And then all the brothers finally got back down to Egypt, and they went before the viceroy of Egypt, and they bowed down to him without knowing who he was. Then this blessing has come to pass, right? The blessing then was given to Yaakov, but the blessing to Yaakov was fulfilled through Joseph, okay? And we look at Yaakov in the natural term, and then we call him Israel if we look at a spiritual application, so to speak. I'm just trying to say that these blessings that Yahweh spoke have come through Yaakov and are going to be fulfilled, Yaakov, individually as us being the descendants of Yaakov, whether we are born that way or whether we join with and become part of, because we're all of the same blood anyway, going all the way back to Noah. Okay? Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay? So when people say, well, that's just in a spiritual sense but not a physical sense, I'm saying that's bull. Okay? Okay. Go back to Deuteronomy. But notice that's important. They are the 10,000s of Ephraim and the thousands of Manasseh. Go right back to Joseph. Go right back to Yaakov. Right back to the blessing that was, that was spoken. Verse 18, and of Zebulun he said, rejoice, Zebulun, in your going out, and Issachar in your tents. Zebulun, the number 2074, it means a dwelling place. And Issachar in your tents. They shall call the peoples to the mountain. There they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness, for they shall partake of the abundance of the seas and of treasures hidden in the sand. Issachar, of course, means he will bring or receive a reward. If we go back to Isaiah chapter 9, or go over to Isaiah chapter 9. In Isaiah 9, verse 1 and 2, it said, nevertheless, the gloom will not be upon her who is distressed, as when at first he lightly esteemed the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterward more heavily oppressed her by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan in Galilee of the Gentiles. Now, why would that be called Galilee of the Gentiles? Remember, when the northern kingdom of Israel, who encompassed all that land, was taken captive by Assyria, they took all the nation of Israel and scattered them up among Turkey and all those nations up in there. And then what did they do? They went and took people out of all the other lands that they conquered, these Gentile lands, and brought those people down and stuck them in this northern kingdom of Israel, and became known as Galilee of the Gentiles. Okay? We read about it when that took place, and it talks about the people didn't know the God of the land, so to speak. So they prayed about it, and then he said, okay, you go up, get some Levites from wherever you took them, and bring the Levites back down, let the Levites teach them about the El of the land. So then they began to learn the El of the land, but then they followed their own gods as well as the El of the land. Is that not what's happening today? They like to say that they're following Yahweh, but they're following their other gods as well. There's no separation between the two. And then in Matthew 4, if you remember, these are the blessings that we're reading that Moshe is putting on the sons of Israel. In Genesis, what Jacob said was, this is what's going to befall you in the last days. So a whole lot of what we're reading here in Deuteronomy has come to pass, and yet going back to the first in Genesis is yet to come to pass. So the first shall be last, and the last came first. Again. In Matthew chapter 4, in verses 12 through 13. Verse 12, now when Yehoshua heard that Yochanan had been put in prison, he departed to Galilee. And leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capharnaum, not Capernaum, but Capharnaum, the village of Nahum, which is by the sea in the regions of Zebulun and Naphtali, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people who sat in darkness saw a great light, and upon those who sat in the region and shadow of death, light has dawned. From that time Yehoshua began to preach and to say, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Repent. Repent means to turn back in obedience to the Torah, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Go back to Deuteronomy. Get the microphone. Did y'all hear that? Woke everybody up, huh? In verse 20, and of Gad he said, blessed is he who enlarges Gad. He dwells as a lion and tears the arm and the crown of his head. He provided the first part for himself because a lawgiver's portion was reserved there. He came with the heads of the people. He administered the justice of Yahweh and his judgments with Yisrael. Remember, Gad said we were going to receive our inheritance on this side of the Jordan without crossing over. And Moses said, okay, you can do that, but you're still going to have to cross over until all the other brothers, get their inheritance, and then you can go back and claim yours. And he said, okay, and they did exactly what they said they would do. And then Joshua did what Moses promised would come to pass. But in verse 21, a lawgiver's portion was reserved there. When Moses died and was buried, where was he buried? In the land of Gad, on the east side of the Jordan. Moses didn't cross over the Jordan River. So the lawgiver's portion was there in the land that was given to Gad. I don't know if people thought about it much or not, but that's where he was. And then it talks about later on, they were, the angel was arguing with the devil over, the body of Moses. And then people say, well, Moses never really died. Well, I wonder why they was arguing over his body if he wasn't dead. That's... Anyway, in verse 22, and of Dan he said, Dan is a lion's whelp. He shall leap from Bashan. Go to Joshua 19. In Joshua chapter 19. Does anybody remember the story about Dan and when they went in to take over their land? They never really got the land that they were supposed to get. Right? Verse 40, it said, the seventh lot came out for the tribe of the children of Dan according to their families. And then verse 40, and the territory of their inheritance was Zorah, and so on and so forth. But in verse 47, and the border of the children of Dan went beyond these, because the sons of Dan went up to fight against Lashem and took it, and they struck it with the edge of the sword, took possession of it, and dwelt in. Yet they called Lashem Dan after the name of Dan their father. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the sons of Dan according to their families, these cities with their villages. So Dan, they weren't exactly the cream of the crop as far as being obedient to Yahweh's word and having a real care about their brothers and sisters and so forth. If we go back and look again at verse 22, and of Dan he said, he is a lion's whelp, he shall leap from Bashan. Where is Bashan? What we know today as the Golan Heights. And when a lion leaps, he just leaps on something to conquer, right? And that's what he's saying Dan was. This is what he did. He leaped and he conquered a whole lot of other areas, in the north, instead of just what he was told to have. In verse 23, and of Naphtali he said, remember Naphtali, the numbers 53:21, means my wrestling. And he said, Naphtali, satisfied with favor and full of the blessing of Yahweh, possessed the west and the south. The word satisfied, actually it means satiated with favor. And the word favor there is the number 75:22. One of the meanings of the word is words of beauty. So he was satiated with words of beauty, of the blessing of Yahweh. Possessed the west and the south. And in verse 24, we're talking about the tribe of Asher, which means, of course, happy. And of Asher, he said, Asher is most blessed of sons. Let him be favored by his brothers, and let him dip his foot in oil. Your sandals will be iron and copper, and as your days, so shall your strength be. Great number of days, great amount of strength. That word oil is the word 8081. Bashimin, or in Bashimin, or in Shimin. And I know that a lot of people today say, well, that's talking about, petroleum, oil, digging, drilling for oil and all this kind of stuff. But the number 8081 is oil as from the olive. Isn't it funny, some of the doctrines that get built on English words like oil. But when you find out what the real word really says, and somehow those doctrines just can't seem to continue to stand, In verse 25,